Mic check. This one? Yeah. Testing, 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 testing. PA, right there. Good morning, everyone. Let's hear it up again for Zaire Goodman. Good morning, everyone. My name is Curtis Young. I'm the Deputy Director for Community Affairs here in the office of the New York City Public Advocate Jumaane Williams. We gather today on grounds that hold memory, grounds that has witnessed both the depths of human suffering and the extraordinary resilience of the human spirit. This site is not merely a place on a map. It is a testament. It is a reckoning. It is a sacred space where we are called to stop, to listen, and to honor the lives of enslaved Africans who lived, labored, loved, and died here, men, women, and children whose names history did not always choose to record, but whose presence shaped this city, this nation, and this world in ways we are still discovering. New York's history, with slavery, is often obscured by the passage of time and the presence for more comfortable narratives. But the truth is powerful, and it is necessary. New York was a slave-holding city. The labor of enslaved Africans built its streets, its economy, our economy, and its future, a future that were not permitted to be shared freely. An estimated 95% of Africans in this city from the late 17th to the 18th centuries were enslaved to do the work building this great city. The streets you walk to arrive here, the city that surrounds us, its very foundation carries their labor and their sacrifice. We come here today not to dwell in grief alone, but to bear witness, to clearly say, we see you, we remember you. Our lives mattered then, your lives matter then, and they matter now. This welcome event is an act of remembrance and of community. We invite you to walk through this space with open hearts, to learn, to reflect, and to carry what you discover here into your understanding of who we are as a people and who we are as a city. So thank you all once again, and I'll pass it over to our Reverend to open us in the invocation. Thank you, Reverend Lewis.
Good morning, beautiful people.
Good morning.
I'm the senior minister of Middle Collegiate Church. I want to locate myself in this story as I open us in prayer. The Collegiate Church is the Dutch Reformed Church in America. We divested ourselves of that name when we divested ourselves from South African apartheid. But in 1628, the first Collegiate Church was built right here at the fort behind the wall that became Wall Street. And those Dutch Reformed clergy participated in the taking of the land from the Lenape and also the building of this city with African labor. I am the first black, first woman person to be hired in that church since 1628. I got hired in 2004. It took a long time to break that ceiling. But I confessionally invite us to pray, holding the truth of the participation of the church, all the churches, in enslaving African people. So we need new words, we need new heart, we need new prayers, we need new anthems. And this is an anthem of interdependence. My prayer is an anthem of interdependence. You're going to hear a tune that you know, the Star Spangled Banner. Try not to be mad, because that's not what I'm singing. Okay. Oh, say, can't you see what is plain to behold? Though we shout liberty, there are too many in chains. We are shackled by greed and the fear we are small. But this truth must be told. There is one God who loves all. Won't you give me your hand, and together we'll stand with radical love, heal our souls and our land. Oh, say, can't we end all this fighting and strife and walk toward the light, that we all might be free. Amen.
Now we're going to call up Treja Bostic for a rendition of Lift Every Voice and Sing. We ask you all to please join along.
Let's see. Morning.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmony of liberty. Let our rejoicings rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died, yet with a steady beat have not our weary feet come to the place for which our fathers sighed. We have come over a way that with tears have been watered. We have come treading the path through the blood of slaughtered. Out from the gloomy past, till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of our bright star is cast. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, thou who hast by thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in our path, we pray. Lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Lest our feet shadowed beneath the we forget thee. Shadowed beneath thy hand, may we forever stand true to our God, true to our native land.
Thank you very much. All three verses are always required and needed for occasions such as this. Now we're going to hear special remarks from the public advocate himself, Jamani Williams, followed by Madge Allen from the Association of African American Research Studies.
Oh, no. Peace and blessing, love and light, everybody. How you doing? Thank you so much for coming out today. Where's the sister that just killed that? Peace, sister, you killed that. You made it through everything that happened, yo. You kept going like a true champ. That was dope. So it's an honor to be within this space. I want to make sure we recognize the land of the Lenape that was stolen and the land that we stand on right now. Today we sit in the shadow of skyscrapers and of history, a history that's too often ignored. Much will be said in the coming weeks about what happened in this land 250 years ago. But first, I think it's critical that we go back further. 400 years ago, the first enslaved Africans were brought to our city in bondage. This country was built on the back of African ancestors, all too literally. And here in New York, our city codified that atrocity, where now stands benches once there were auction blocks. The council at the time sanctioned this barbaric industry for over 50 years. In fact, enslaved Africans helped build the first city council. 10 years ago, I worked to ensure that this history is not forgotten, that here, amid the luxurious wealth of Wall Street, we were reminded of where that wealth came from. And I felt compelled to return to the site today to recall this history as we approach the milestone anniversary. The fireworks will echo over the East River, and most won't think of the black bodies stolen and trafficked across it. But for me, that legacy echoes, so does the question that Frederick Douglass put forward: what to the slave is the 4th of July? Frederick Douglass delivered his address 76 years into this nation's history. Almost 2 centuries later, I'm not alone in asking what to their descendants, to Black America, is the country's 250th anniversary. 250 years ago, America declared that all men were created equal. They claimed to hold that fundamental truth as self-evident, but it is clear that they lied. When the Declaration was signed and sent, these men returned to homes sustained by enslaved labor. We sit today between our country's observance of Juneteenth and the 4th of July, between celebrations of freedom delivered and freedom declared. And that same state of uneasy in between is where I find myself today as a black man in America, particularly as I look at how this country celebrates both Juneteenth and 4th of July. Across those 250 years, black men in America only won civil rights about 60 years ago. For the first 100 years of this country, a black man was 3/5 of an American, and for the next 100, a second-class citizen by the law. And if a black man was a second-class citizen, what do you say of the black woman, like my mother and my daughters? That is a whole speech for another time. And I don't need to tell anyone here that even when the laws change, the legacy does not. In policing and justice, in redlining neighborhoods, in health inequity, in wealth distribution, in immigration raids, environmental hazards, in the criminal legal system, it is clear a country founded on freedom has failed to truly deliver it to all Americans. You can say that their arc, however long, bends toward justice. That movement, however slow, is forward. I've certainly repeated those words many times, many, many times. But in this moment, the highest powers in our country are working to bend that arc backward. We can rightly celebrate the freedom won and the people who fought for it, the progress made and victories secured for the people like our families, often through the struggles of the black Americans who came before. And at the same time, we have to acknowledge not only injustices still uncorrected, but the ways that those in power are seeking to undo the progress of decades. The powerful have mounted an all-out effort to erase the history and strip away the rights of black Americans. From the dismantling of voting rights to racist gerrymandering to ending TPS, this White House pretends, in fact wishes, that black America simply did not exist. And tens of millions of people go along with this fiction they prefer. They scorn Juneteenth and the liberty it represents. But in just a few days, we are expected to let freedom ring across the nation, which brings us right back to the 4th of July. My mother's first day as a Grenadian immigrant in our city was actually the 4th of July. And I can't imagine what was going through her head as an 18-year-old dropped into this celebration of a nation she was new to a place she chose to come because it promised a life of liberty and the pursuit of happiness. I wondered whether at that moment she, now a young black woman, felt some new sense of patriotism, particularly on the backs of black Americans who had fought before her. I know in some spaces the word patriotism is dirty. It's been corrupted as conservative. And I understand why. I know that when many, if we're honest, walk down streets that are simply lined with American flags in red, white, and blue, they get anxious. And I understand that, and if we're honest, there's reason for it. But I also know that I refuse to let the idea of patriotism be repurposed for prejudice, because patriotism shouldn't be equated with nationalism. It isn't jingoism, and it isn't blind loyalty. Patriotism can be a sense of service, of purpose, of love for one's community, and commitment to those within it, of the never-ending work of improving the nation for the sake of its people, of demanding that this country live up to the promises spoken to my mother and many like her. I find my patriotism in public service and in protest. Surely a nation founded on revolution can understand that. For black Americans, for any people who this country's leaders or laws have subjugated, patriotism can be an act of defiance against those who would abuse it. 250 years since the revolution, I hold these truths to be self-evident. America is not automatic, America is not assumed good by its mere existence, not by the history repeated nor the fable fabricated. When it is good, it is made so by its people, its principles, and its purpose, and usually by protest. And I believe that this is possible to celebrate. But if America is to celebrate what makes America great, then it has to be honest in reckoning with the cost of that greatness. Consider the unpaid debt to yield the well-manicured lawn where you now host a picnic to celebrate independence. The 4th of July celebrates that people who look like me didn't have 400 years ago or 250 years ago. And Black Americans today are still waiting to move from the notion of freedom to actual true liberation. Liberation is freedom from oppression, freedom from fear, freedom from violence in our streets and our systems. Liberation tears down systems of injustice propped up by the powerful. It's not having to leave the city you were born in and help build because you can't afford to live there. We stand on Wall Street, the purest evidence of those unjust systems, tower overhead long after Black Wall Street was purposely burned down. I know this, and still I try to search for that feeling that brought my mother here, brought so many to these streets where we cross new cultural borders at every corner. What to America is the 4th of July? What to Black America is the 4th of July? Maybe it's a desire to make this country one we can be proud of without reservation. Maybe it's a search for a reason for patriotism, not because we owe it, but because we deserve it. And if you know me, I'm not one for many of the anthems that are sung around this time to the country. Yet I was struck recently listening to Ray Charles's rendition of America the Beautiful. Because throughout America's states and story, there is beauty to celebrate, not in the emptiness of spacious skies or waves of rain, but as Charles sings it, oh, beautiful for heroes proved in liberating strife, who more than self their country loved, and mercy more than life. Those heroes proved in liberating strife included Frederick Douglass himself. They include Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth, and Dr. King, and Malcolm X, and Claudette Colvin, and Rosa Parks, and John Lewis, and Angela Davis, and yes, whether you want to admit it or not, Marsha P. Johnson, and so many names that are forgotten. America, America, God shed his grace on thee, till selfish gain no longer strain the banner of the free, nor the joy of the liberated. Thank you.
Let's give it up for the public gathering. Jamani Williams, thank you very much. All right, now we're going to bring up to the podium Madge Allen, who is one of our leading partners, actually. She worked with us with the planning for this event today, the group that she's a part of, and she's been behind the work of Abolitionist Day. This is an effort to have an Abolitionist Day on the official federal calendar. Madge Allen has been integral in making that advocacy work come to the forefront of our conversations as a representative for the Association for the Study of African American Life and History in New York. Thank you, Madge Allen.
Thank you very much. Yes, he says, my name is Madge Allen, and I'm a member of FASALA and also a member of the Abolition Commemoration Day Association of New York Incorporation. I'll get back to that later. ASALA, that stands for the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. And that was founded on September the 9th, 1915 by Dr. Carter G. Woodson, George Cleveland Hall, Alexander L. Jackson, James E. Stamps, and William B. Hartgrove. Now the mission of FASALA is to promote, research, preserve, interpret, and disseminate information about Black life, history, and culture to the global community. And the Bronx branch of FASALA, under the leadership of Bessie M. Jackson, sought to get a state holiday for the abolition of slavery in New York. Slavery in New York was abolished on July the 4th, 1827. Next year will be our 200 years of the abolition of slavery. The New York State legislature voted this. There was a lot of work in between trying to get this as a holiday. Not until I think 2017 or 18 that we approached Senator Brian Benjamin did we get any action. Or as a result, on July the 22nd, 2020, a law was passed by the New York State legislature to make this a state holiday. Matter of fact, the same bill was signed on the day when New York State decided to make Juneteenth a holiday. But a lot of people still are not aware of the abolition of Slavery Day. And as to get the date spread, we decided to create the Abolition Commemoration Day Association, which as of today, it has spread to at least 7 places. All the boroughs in New York will be celebrating it this year except Staten Island. We have a lot of information over on the table there, and we hope that you all will celebrate it and talk to us about it, or else you can start your own spreading information about the abolition. And let's spread it so maybe sooner or later the whole state will spread that. Thank you. That's okay?
Yeah, thank you. That's excellent. Thank you so much. All right. So first of all, I forgot to start off by saying Nixon 5. So I apologize. About that. But next up, we're going to have an excerpt from an amazing actor. Actually, there's a new movie coming out that he's in. I first got to know him from The Wire. I always mess up his last name, but he's going to do a rendition of Fredrick, which is what to the slave is the 4th of July. So please give a round of applause for Benga Akinabe. I think I get closer every time I say it. And then it'll be followed by a panel discussion on the excerpt. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This only takes years to get it right. Thank you, brother. The fact is, ladies and gentlemen, the distance between this platform and the slave plantation from which I escaped is considerable. And the difficulties to be overcome in getting from the latter to the former are by no means slight. That I am here today is, to me, a matter of astonishment, as well as gratitude. This, for the purpose of this celebration, is the 4th of July. It is the birthday of your national independence and of your political freedom. On the 2nd of July, 1776, the old Continental Congress, to the dismay of lovers of ease and the worshippers of property in the form of a resolution, it may refresh your minds and help my story if I read it, resolved that these united colonies are, and of right, ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connections between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be dissolved. Citizens, your fathers made good that resolution. They succeeded, and to you, today, you reap the fruits of their success. The freedom gained is yours, and you, therefore, may properly celebrate this anniversary. The 4th of July is the first great fact in your nation's history, the very ring bolt in the chain of your yet undeveloped destiny. What to the American slave is the 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him more than all other days in the year the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is a constant victim. To him, your celebration is a sham, your boasted liberty an unholy license, your national greatness swelling vanity. Your sounds of rejoicing are empty and heartless. Your denunciations of tyrants, brass-fronted impudence. Your shouts of liberty and equality, hollow mockery. Your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgivings, with all your religious parade and solemnity, are to him mere bombast, fraud, deception, impiety, and hypocrisy, a thin veil to cover up crimes which would disgrace a nation of savages. Fellow citizens, pardon me, allow me to ask, why am I called upon to speak here today? What have I, or those I represent, to do with your national independence? All the great principles of political freedom and natural justice embodied in that Declaration of Independence extend to us? And am I therefore called upon to bring our humble offerings to the national altar and to confess the benefits and express devout gratitude for the blessings resulting from your independence to us? Would to God, both for your sakes and ours, that an affirmative answer could be truthfully returned to these questions. Then would my task be light, and my burden easy and delightful. For who is there so cold that a nation's sympathy could not warm him? Who so obdurate and dead to the claims of gratitude that would not thankfully acknowledge such priceless benefits? Who is so stolid and selfish that would not give his voice to swell the hallelujahs of a nation's jubilee when the chains of servitude had been torn from his limbs? I am not that man. But such is not the case here. I say with a sad sense of disparity between us. I am not included within the pale of this glorious anniversary. Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us. The blessings in which you, this day, rejoice are not enjoyed in common. The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence bequeathed by your fathers is shared by you, not by me. The sunlight brought to your life and healing to you has brought stripes and death to me. The 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, I must mourn. To drag a man in fetters into the grand illuminated temple of liberty and call upon him to join you in joyous anthems were inhuman mockery and sacrilegious irony. Do you mean, citizens, to mock me by asking me to speak today? Fellow citizens, above your national tumultuous joy, I hear the mournful wail of millions whose chains, heavy and grievous yesterday, are today rendered more intolerable by the jubilee shouts that reach them. I do not hesitate to declare with all my soul that the character and conduct of this nation never looked blacker to me than it does on this 4th of July. Whether we turn to the declarations of the past or the professions of the present, the conduct of the nation seems equally hideous and revolting. America's false to its past, false to the present, and solemnly binds herself to be false to the future. Standing with God and the crushed, bleeding slave on this occasion, I will, in the name of humanity, which is outraged, in the name of liberty, which is fettered, in the name of the Constitution and the Bible, which is disregarded and trampled upon, dare to call in question and to denounce with all the emphasis I can command everything that serves to perpetrate slavery, the great sin and shame of America. I will not equivocate. I will not excuse. I will use the severest language I can command, and yet not one word shall escape me that any man whose judgment is not blinded by prejudice or who is not at his heart a slaveholder shall not confess to be right and just. But I fancy I hear someone of my audience say, is it just in this circumstance that you and your brother abolitionists failed to make a favorable impression on the public mind? Would you argue more and denounce less? Would you persuade more and rebuke less? Your cause would be much more likely to succeed. But I submit, where all is plain, there is nothing to be argued. What point in the anti-slavery creed would you have me argue? On what branch of the subject do the people of this country need light? Allow me to say, in conclusion, notwithstanding the dark picture I have this day presented of the state of the nation, I do not despair for this country. There are forces in operation which must inevitably work the downfall of slavery. The arm of the Lord is not shortened, and the doom of slavery is certain. I therefore leave off where I began, with hope.
Thank you so much. Let's give another round of applause, please. Benga Akinade. Ben, what's the name of the new movie so we know? The Social Reckoning. It's about, what's Facebook?
Facebook, yeah. We want to see that. All right, we're going to move this. So next up, we're going to have the panel discussion.
What?
Pull up.
Just put in a black
I was supposed to be ready, my
250
bad.
BG.
1 second. Next up, we have Aubrey Rice, President and CEO of New York Urban League. Aubrey Rice is the President and CEO of the New York Urban League, where she has dedicated her career to championing civil rights, education, and economic self-reliance for Black and underserved New Yorkers across the 5 boroughs. And Chris Hobb, historian and archivist. Chris Cobb is an artist and a writer and local historian. He works at the Harlem Arts Salon and Gloucester Arts Project, bringing free arts education to children in Mississippi every summer. That marker that was put here was brought to me as an idea by Chris Hobb when I was in the city council. And so I'm really appreciative of him bringing history I didn't know about. And he can tell you it's actually supposed to be a little further down, but one of the issues was that that's private property. We're still trying to get it on there. But this is public property, so we're able to have the city put it there. And just another addition right now is Benga himself. As an actor, he's also an activist. He's going to join us in this discussion as well. So really quick, do we only have one mic? Is that what's happening? All right. So I'm just going to pass down in case really quickly folks want to just say anything that was left out in the bio, and then we have a few questions. So, Chris.
Oh, hi there. I just wanted to say that I think part of why we're here is because all of this history is, they tried to erase it. They tried to leave no trace of any of this history. And I think a lot of activists in New York City want to do something significant. And I think that this is a good place to start to looking at history that's been erased and try to bring it to light. That's my take on it.
Good morning, my brothers and sisters, and thank you so much to our public advocate for bringing us together to have this conversation this morning. Truly a leader amongst leaders, and just terrific to be able to have this conversation with you all. I am moved by your rendition of Frederick Douglass's conversation today. At the New York Urban League, for the last 60 years, we have an annual celebration which is our fundraiser, and it is named for Frederick Douglass himself. And so to be able to have this conversation is just something that is truly meaningful to me, just because we have had this tradition for so long. It was a Jewish woman and a Black woman who came together at that time to celebrate, and they looked for a name for this dinner that would embody the spirit of the New York Urban League, and they chose Frederick Douglass. And so every year we look for individuals who understand that there is no, that the fight for justice has to come through the work that Fredrick Douglass talked about. So I look forward to having this conversation with you all this morning.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Eljoy Wood. No? Okay. President of the NAACP New York State Conference. I'm happy to be here. Thank you to the Public Advocate for inviting us for this conversation. I think it's really important, as was mentioned by our elder, about us reclaiming and teaching our own celebrations and history. Right now, as we speak, NAACP's Freedom School is ending its session, and so I'm going to have to run back out just after that. And I wish our young people were able to be here to experience, because one of the things we are teaching in the Freedom School is about them owning and controlling their own education about who they are, and making sure that we are not just using this information as markers of events, as content for social media, but more how we can embody and know this history and being able to implement it in our everyday lives. And so from going from our Freedom School and celebrating our young people knowing that history and being able to learn how to implement it in their everyday lives, to also going up to Harlem and celebrating Mildred Roxborough, who is turning 100 years old today. Is the oldest staff member of the NAACP and a long-term activist and archivist in her own right. And she was the first one to take me to the Library of Congress, where the NAACP archives are, to show me the wealth of history that is there, and the connection to what our people have organized and fought for. So it's really important that we don't use the phrase, they don't teach us our history, but that we control our own education and our own giving to our young people that legacy and that history of the organizing and the fight for freedom.
That is hard to follow. I'm just grateful to be. All right, we're back. I'm very grateful to be here. We're seeing in real time the erasure of our history and the rewriting of our history. So it just highlights the importance of learning and teaching ourselves and not waiting for others to teach us their version of who we are. So thank you all for the work you do.
Thank you very much. And a lot of folks don't know that the first commodity in Wall Street were black bodies. That was the first commodity that was sold here. One of the reasons we wanted to put the marker up is so we can make sure that we understand where communities are now and why that might be happening, and link that way back to the early times of this country. So the first question is, we're standing on ground where human beings were appraised and sold and separated from their families. Now, after hearing Douglass's words read aloud, what does this specific place ask of us that a classroom or a monument may not do on its own?
So have you ever, my mother-in-law does this, sometimes we're driving and we'll pass by a cemetery, and because she was raised in the Catholic tradition, she's from Puerto Rico, she'll make a sign of a cross or something as we go by, sort of marking the place that she's passing, whether it's in a car, whether we're walking by. And one thing about the markers of places and learning the history and hearing the words is I think about what rituals that we have to not only know internally, right, there's a marker here, this used to be a slave market, but how we have ritual and understanding when we're in those spaces, even if it's a quick thing, to be able to acknowledge what ancestors, what folks who have, walked these streets in a different connotation. And it sitting there made me think of that. Like and we think about rituals as being passed down, but they were created, right? Someone said, okay, when we walk by here, we're gonna do this, and then everybody decided to do that. And so we think about, as we are learning and uncovering these spaces, as you said, that were purposely hidden, purposely meant to be forgotten, as we are rediscovering those spaces, what ritual, what thing that we will do within ourselves and then pass down so that it is not forgotten, that it is not another generation that 50 years from now people are like, oh, what is this sign? Right? Like, or what is this name, or what is this? Right? That it is something that we've embodied and we make ritual and memory about.
So well, to my good friend El Joy, thank you so much for that. I think that it's important, you started out talking about the Freedom School and the young people and telling the stories of young people. And I do think that it is important for us when we are talking about our history, that history is something that is of empowerment. And so our young people, because of their history, that they don't feel so alone, that they are not experiencing this alone, but that the young that our previous generations have gone through these issues and have been successful and have overcome. And so by sometimes looking at slavery sometimes feels heavy, sometimes feels like it's something that is oppressive, but instead it should be empowering because it shows what we have gone through. You started out about talking about your mom and the experience that she had. My parents were sharecroppers. And so as a result of their history, the fact that they came and moved north as a result of the Great Migration Movement, it makes sense that I would be the head of an organization that was founded to help individuals who are moving from the south to the north. Folks who are picking cotton and picking tobacco and picking oranges and decided to come north. And as a result of that, and the small business that my father was able to establish, he was able to make sure that all four of his children were to go through and to graduate from college. So by being able to mark these places of great hurt and great pain and great consternation, from that can come the enthusiasm and the joy and the promise that we can be better than the generation before us.
I would say that we could use more markers. Actually, one of the priorities for me when we were developing this concept of some kind of marker here was to include texts that would talk about the uprising that happened 6 months after this market was established. It might have been winter and then spring, but in 1712, just like on Maiden Lane and Broadway, as maybe people have read the marker, there was a group of people who just didn't want to be enslaved, and so they rose up. There should be a monument to them, because we should have monuments to people who fought for their freedom rather than the generals who oversaw slave plantations. Like, what kind of crazy world do we live in? We don't have statues. They don't have statues to Nazi generals in Germany. How psychopathic would that be to have Nazi generals on horses in public squares? But then they want that here. That's psychopathic. That's not healthy. That is very unhealthy. And I don't think anybody wants to be a part of that world where that's normal.
Thank you for that. The only thing I would tweak a little bit is, unfortunately, some people do want to live in that world, which becomes part of the problem. So I'm going to ask maybe one or two of the prepared questions. Folks that should have gotten an index card. So if you have this index card and you have any questions for the panel, please let us know. If you have any questions for the panel in particular, anyone, or the panel in general. Just really quick, I just want to see how you say Jumani in sign language. I didn't know. Okay, let's see. Ah, okay, I didn't know that. I have to give you a sign name. Okay, next time we got to get a sign name so they can get it. All right, no doubt, no doubt. Okay, so next question is, Frederick Douglass was really scathing and he did not pull back about the American hypocrisy. Yet he also called the Declaration's principles a saving anchor and refused to give up on them. How do you hold these two truths at once? I think many of us kind of grapple with it. Fierce critique, well-deserved, and then genuine faith in the founding ideals. I'll start with you, Benny, because you didn't answer and ask one, but we can pass it.
I'm going to answer that question, but I want to go back to something you said as far as uplifting resistance movements and monuments to those who fight for their freedom, as opposed to making monuments and rewarding the oppressors. And all I could think was Palestine. So we don't envision like what it would be like to honor resistance fighters fighting oppression there, but we should. I think that's what's happening now, a recontextualizing of what's really going on, and we should take that to heart. As far as your question, what's your question?
Don't forget the Congo.
Ah, yes.
Sudan.
Congo.
Don't do that. Don't
Absolutely.
do
Sudan. Anyway. America's behind all of it as far as empire. So but it starts with steps like what's happening in New York City. This is to me the best time to be in New York as far as the fight for freedom and justice and recontextualizing our role in the world. But which leads to your question. The empire will use really good words and really good stories and represent itself as the savior and represent as democracy bringers and put those words in documents like the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and so on. It's still the empire. It's still doing horrible things. Now, how do you reconcile that? There's context out there that things that we can pull from that we can use, right? I think it's a constant revisiting and interrogating of our history that brings to light the truth as opposed to the propaganda, and I think that's what we're going through right now. Like a lot of light is being shed on the misinformation, and so that's what I think. It's about you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, but you make sure that the truth is told, and because there will always be a group of people who will try to give a certain narrative that keeps them in power, and you have to make sure they stay out of power, which we did last week.
So when I used to do cable news a lot, and one of the things that they like to do is like put a liberal progressive with a conservative person like at the same table kind of thing. That's what they like to do. And there was a new guy, is a writer, conservative writer, and we had kids around the same age. In the back in the green room, we would have good personal conversation, but then we get on air and disagree on everything, right? And so leave it to a black woman trying to find common ground. I was like, we should go to lunch one day, because I didn't understand how he could write so much about America founding and the founding fathers and all of this, and had so much vitriol at the time for organizers from Black Lives Matter and the protests and things, because I could see the direct correlation between activists and organizers in the early founding of the country and what we were doing during that time in terms of police brutality and things. You could see the correlation, right? But he couldn't grasp it. And so we went to lunch and, we're talking about it, and I say to him, we're having a conversation, and I can battle with the most in terms of early founding history, and so we're talking about that, and he's like, yeah, and these people who were poor and oppressed. I was like, no, they were tavern owners. They were business owners that were upset about taxes. It wasn't the same in representation in Parliament. It wasn't the same as if it was the enslaved joining with the tavern who seek freedom. Like they wanted freedom from what they thought was financial persecution. It's not the same as someone seeking freedom from bondage or freedom from police brutality, right? So I don't understand how you don't see the correlation. It was like, oh, nobody's ever put it like that before. And I was like, what the heck? Right? That because of skin color, because of racial connotation, because of what has been, preached to you in this narrative, setting up this narrative of who these people are, that you can't see the humanity in people, right? And see the correlation in that. And I think it's important as we are teaching these empowering stories, as we are teaching our history, that we also get to the meat of it, and explaining to our next generation so they can see beyond what narrative has been created for them, what propaganda has been created for them, so you can see yourself in the struggle in a Palestinian. You can see yourself in the struggle for those who are fighting in Sudan, right? Like you can see right? The parallels, even if you don't identify with them racially, economically, or anything like that. And I think that is the reason why we keep repeating, right, these same behaviors in humanity, is because we are not doubling down on that lesson of being able to identify with someone's humanity and what they're fighting for at a base level.
Two things came to mind when you asked that question about how can hope and critique live in the same person and live in that same speech and live in the body of Frederick Douglass. And I think that we have been told, particularly by this administration, that we cannot critique the United States without being seen as or deemed as unpatriotic. And the fact is as we know, we built this, right? This is ours, right? It is our music. It is our culture. It is our work. It is our backbones. And so for them to say that we cannot critique what we built, we cannot believe that, right? We cannot hold to the fact that our voices can be silenced in this country, the country that we built. So that was the first thing that came to mind for me. The second thing that came to mind is I talked about my mom. She's now 79 years old, and I speak to my mother every night at 9 p.m. And so I call her and I tell her about my day and she tells her about hers. And a lot of the things that happen in her day have to do with the television that she watched that day. And the television is so many negative messages and so many things so many things that are going on that she thought that her and my father had fought for, so that her children, her grandchildren, her great-grandchildren wouldn't have to endure. And so sometimes when I'm in those conversations with my mom, it feels kind of hopeless, because she feels like we have a president who is being unchecked in his power, who is doing things that she just could not have ever imagined to be happening, like I said, for her kids, grandkids, and great-grandchildren. And so in those conversations, I have that struggle between being hopeful and being forward. And I said, Mom, I can't do this work if I believe that we can't teach our children, that we can't do better, that we can't organize, that we can't support each other in this work in order to make sure that this moment is something that we learn from, something that we have to rebuild as we go forward, and something that we learn that freedom is fought for in each and every single generation, and this is our time and our opportunity to keep doing and be in that fight.
Well, we can't do it alone, right? And I think that's a big part of all of this, is that one of the things that we have to really focus on is how we can work together. And you have a resource, or you have a resource, I have a resource. Can we bring our people together? Can we figure out a way forward? Because stuff like this, maybe in a year we'll try to make it illegal. You know what I mean? Like, we're not going to let that happen, because we're not going to give up and curl up in a ball and hide. No. By being visible, by being out and talking to people and sharing your ideas, that is how you fight. You don't hide, you don't shrink, you stand up and you push back. And these people are bullies, and they want us to back down, and we're not going to back down. And I have to think that when Frederick Douglass came to New York and all the infrastructure, all of the society wanted to make reading and writing illegal, now give me a break, right? What an admission of cowardice, right? Make it illegal for any education, right? For an entire class of people. And how upsetting it must have been when Frederick Douglass taught himself to read and write. And how upsetting it must have been for people who had been hell-bent on preventing a whole class of people from even knowing their own history. How upsetting it must have been when he started his own newspaper, because he had a lot to say. And then there's another, I actually learned about a woman recently named Marianne Shadd Carey. I've read a lot, but I haven't, do any of you know her, Marianne Shadd Carey? She's the first black woman to start her own newspaper, and I think it's out of the upstate New York area, and she traveled around and was in Canada and Ontario too. But she published a newspaper called the Provincial Freedman, and guess what? She had a lot to say too, And I'm really proud of her and Frederick Douglass for publishing, because I think that's the root of all of this, is that standing up also means putting yourself out there and being counted,
Thank you. And in talking about the the history, even LJ, what you were talking about back then, it reminds me that I'm not, and this is probably a discussion for another panel, but it's connected. The people I don't think folks understand the creation of whiteness, the way it was created and why it was created. So Fredrick Douglass actually went to Ireland to tell the Irish folks who were actually working in the field alongside with the enslaved Africans to not join with the folks who were enslaving, but join with the workers to fight back against the oppression. He pleaded with them, and they chose not to. And so what we've seen by a lot of folks who've come later on is they make a decision of who to be aligned with and who not to be aligned with. And we see that with immigrants, whether it's the Irish, whether it's the Italian. By the way, another tangential, Christopher Columbus is only popular because the Irish actually, who were being lynched and who were being put upon, wanted to find a connection to the American whiteness, and they lynched on, they licked onto Christopher Columbus. And so now we have to celebrate someone who introduced some of the worst genocide in this country. So that issue of race, I just want folks to understand that it is purposeful. It's not, when we bring it up, it's not because I'm a human, so I believe in human beings, but people have put a demarcation that causes oppression from a lot of folks. We also put our own demarcations. We can think about LGBTQ and all the other stuff. That's a whole nother conversation again for another time. But I did want to ask, because sometimes when I'm talking, I think I'm just giving statements of fact. It is a fact that there was an open-air slave market. It was a fact that this country was devised around anti-blackness, and it is connected to what we have today. I also say that no one alive today, black, white, or brown, is responsible for that. I think that all of us are responsible for what comes next. And I'll talk about privilege. And people hear things that I'm not saying. They think I'm calling them a racist. Like I always say, you might be, I don't know you, but that's not what I'm saying right now. I'm saying there is a system of privilege. I, as a man, have some privilege. I don't have to be misogynist, transphobic, to have pushed forward a system that is or benefit from. It's just privilege. But for some reason, people hear things and they think they're being said a different way when it's really about making this better. And so, for no particular reason, Chris, I'm going to start with you. You obviously are able to take those statements of fact and say, how can we come together to push this forward? I'm just wondering, how come it doesn't hit you the same way I see some other folks get hit and get really defensive when it's really like, no, how do we make this thing better? And so I'm so appreciative of you that you brought this to me. I had no idea that this was here. I'm appreciative of what you're doing, and I think we need to have more folks that come forward of all persuasions and say, no, this is about human beings and how we make this country better. So I'd love to understand what makes you receive the facts in the way that you do, in a way that is helpful, and how do we try to get others to do something?
That's a big question. You know, I've actually talked to, being a middle-aged white guy, I have the privilege to talk to mega middle-aged white guys. And I'm genuinely curious what's rolling around in their head, because it doesn't make sense to me. But, you know, I'm lucky because I had a mother who valued literacy, and we had books all over the place. We had records. We were experienced to culture. Cultural literacy was important when I was a child. And I learned later in life that a lot of kids, you know, when they're like 0 to 7, don't have music in their lives, they don't have art in their lives, they're not around other people who are different than them, and so they formulate weird ideas that can be impressed upon them. And the MAGA people I've spoken to have giant gaps in their historical knowledge. Like, they simply don't know anything about Jim Crow. Like, they don't understand that Abraham Lincoln gets the credit for freeing slaves, but really, look at how much work Frederick Douglass did. You know, he was working for decades, and, you know, like Marianne Shad Carey also, she was publishing for, you know, against all odds, and all the abolitionist movement, all the activists, all these people building up this potent force allowed Lincoln to act, you know, ambiguously at best. But, you know, the fact is that the South actually won the Civil War. they won some battles, but psychologically, mentally, structurally, and legally, they still had a grip on this country. And I think that a lot of people don't receive that history. But, you know, from my experience has been it's a one-on-one conversation. And I've had to talk to family members. But you know what? When they see me, they say, we want to talk to you about what we saw on Fox News. And I say, okay, let's pick the topic. And then we, you know, and like what you were saying, like, it's easy for some people to misinterpret what you're saying as an accusation, but a lot of people have just not been gotten to. Because I think the American public is probably the most, I've heard it's the most propagandized too in the world. I mean, a lot of people I know, not you, you know, haven't gotten all the history. And it's a long road, right? You got a lot of reading to do, you got to talk to a lot of people, but I think it's rooted in conversations. And, you know, it's unfair that we should have to educate people who are ignorant of the truth. It's unfair, but it's like when you're a mom, it's unfair that you should constantly have to deal with the kids and answer all their crazy questions. It's unfair you have to wipe these little kids' diapers, you know, that's not fair. And I think that we all just end up becoming teachers, whether we want to or not, whether we went to school to be a teacher or not. I think we all just have to accept the fact that in order to make change, we have to teach. And that's my take on it.
Shortly after George Floyd died, we all remember that everybody wanted to be supportive of Black people, entities, causes, that sort of thing. But we were also right in the middle of COVID. And so I had been sent home. And so I was in my living room, and I literally would get phone calls from people saying, hi, is this a New York Urban League? Yes, it is. Okay, so you serve Black people? Yes, we do. Okay, so we want to do something for the Blacks. And so literally people would call, they would ask for my routing number, for the check number, in order to just send something so that they could say that they had done something positive for Blacks, right? And I'm really seriously not exaggerating. And so we started to get we got phone calls from people who just wanted to send something to Blacks. And then we got phone calls from people who really were trying to do something differently in their communities. And other people who were calling and saying, you know, we're having a lot of Zoom calls because we're still working from home, and we're noticing that when we look at the people on the Zoom call, suddenly it hit them. There's only 2 boxes where they have Black people, or 3 boxes where they have women. And so they said, you know what, we actually want to do something positive. So one of the companies that called me, who I will not call by name, but they do wear pinstripes and they play in the Bronx, called me and they said that they wanted to do something positive with their organization. And so we started to have conversations about what it looked like to be in this particular moment in time. And so one of the things that I did in order to help to build that bridge is I started out by talking about privilege. And so when I spoke to the other facilitators and said, we're going to start out talking about privilege, they're like, whoa, 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 whoa. This is a big partner of ours. Do you really want to risk this by starting with that conversation? And I said, no, me, Arva Rice, I have privilege because I woke up in America. I have 2 parents and I have a college degree. And so as a result of that, no matter what happens in life, I have some level of privilege, right? And so I was able to speak to this organization about that, and then talk about the fact that all the privilege that I don't have, right? And so we were able to connect because we realized, because of our common privilege, that we could talk about other things. And I think that what you talked about with Jim Crow is the key. Because people want to talk about, well, slavery, that was 200 years ago. Let's talk about Jim Crow and its impact on all of us. I often think when I open up my bank account, if my parents had ever gotten their 40 acres and a mule, trust, the Rices would be billionaires, right? And so the difference that it made for all those things that we were promised and not given, and the ways in which we were held back, things were taken away from us, and the impact that it has on us today. But I think that it goes back to the lunch that you tried to have, that you did have with that colleague that helped you to build that common ground. And that's the place and space I think we always need to start at in order to move forward.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that's some key stuff. And I always tell folks, I mean, because people all say, oh, slavery was a long time ago. You can count from slavery to Reconstruction, to Jim Crow, to the housing crisis, to now. By the way, I always tell folks, People forget, even after the day enslaved folks were free, they didn't get the 40 acres and a mule, and every single institution that you need for your life was now owned by the people who just enslaved you. So I'm not sure how much we think happened in that gap time period. Count your ancestors back then. Yeah, that's right. So I'm going to go to some questions in the audience right now. I'll probably do 2 of those, and I know we're not on time. I want to get folks and people to do some of their tabling. So I'm going to just ask 2. Dr. Tawan Guilford, actually I'll do this one first and then that one together. Kevin from the Bronx about reparations. Is the idea of reparations for African Americans still viable in light of the Trump regime? And Dr. Tawan Guilford Hall from Harlem on mass incarceration. As we embark on the 250th anniversary of this nation, what are your thoughts on the perpetuation of slavery through mass incarceration? I'll start with Eldred.
So I have whole lectures on both of these things, so I'll try to condense it. In terms of reparations, so I was proud to be, the person that shepherded the coalition to get the Reparations Commission established here in New York State. And we do have a commission that now has extended time and is studying and providing recommendations to the legislature on how reparations could be enacted in New York. I would say that reparations is still viable, not only statewide, federally, and internationally. Because first, which is tied to our education and history, we cannot let opposition solely dictate what is possible for us. You get it? Right? So people ask this question all the time. It's just like, oh, well, they ain't gonna let us. Right? You have a lot of conversations like that, right? Where people say, they ain't gonna let us own nothing. They ain't gonna let us get no whatever. But what's the other phrase that we like quoting incidentally? Power concedes nothing, right? But the key word in that is power. And so it is incumbent upon us, the promise of greater representation in business and corporate, in elected office, is that we would go to the table and then be able to change the procedures, change the way in which things were operated. So we now live in a space where, particularly in New York, we have more representation than ever before. And so then what is stopping us from being able to get what we have earned and deserve? Does it make sense? Okay? But power concedes nothing without a demand, right? And so being able to change your mindset that you are not going, one of the things that I try to communicate to the governor, to the legislature and others, is that when Black people come and demand what is rightfully theirs, you think of it as a handout, you think of it as it's like, okay, a favor. These are not favors. This is not this is not charity. This is not doing something out of the goodness of your heart. This is things that are owed to you. And so when you change your mindset and think about, no, will they give us this, versus how do we strategize to ensure that our communities get what they deserve, right? That changes your strategy. It changes what you demand. It changes how you move. And then as it relates to mass incarceration, that's still, the fact that our brothers and sisters who are locked up, and increasingly more sisters being locked up, this is enslavement, right? This is wage theft, right? Those things are true. And so again, it is incumbent upon us, just as we fundamentally changed American democracy. We did that. Our ancestors did that, right? After the Civil War, the Reconstruction, it was because of us that we have those amendments, right? It was because of us that we've changed what American democracy could be, because it started off as something else for a very small population of people. So if we can and have the documented history of changing what defines American democracy, in this period now where they're trying to pull back again to that small defined population in terms of who democracy is for, this is an opportunity for us to propel forward and thinking about how do we remake American democracy again.
Could I add just one thing to what you said? One of the things that came up when I was speaking to these different MAGA guys is the word fairness. And I think that's something that's missing from the frame about reparations or the frame of civil rights, is that I think that there is a conceptual gap between what they know about fairness and what we're trying to say. Because what fairness is relative, right? They think that it's unfair. Like they don't know what affirmative action is at all, and then they think it's unfair because they don't get special things, and like that. But see, they don't understand that we're all part of a class warfare, and that wages are low. Partly, I don't know if this is backed up by statistics, but prison labor, because so many cities and states rely on it, so many municipalities. I wonder if the wages are so low, like minimum wage, because that slave labor pulls down the wages in cities. And that's another thing about the whole slavery and prison labor system, is that white people back then probably didn't realize that having that whole class of unpaid labor means that they didn't make very much money either. That it brought the value of their labor way down. And like, you could say, hey, did that society champion human rights? Did it get you better health care? Did white supremacy get you paid time leave? Paid time off from work? No, it didn't. Did white supremacy get you, Social Security? No, it didn't. Right.
That happened before, right? When we talk, anybody know about the history of the Gilded Age, right? Where you have, there's another period. Anytime black people, working class people of any race come together to push against, right, corporate interests and things, whatever, it is always a racial divide that is presented in order to dismantle it. You can look at that in the Gilded Age, where you had these workers who had no protections, were making pennies on the dollar, working, late hours and all of that. They come together, right? Working class, as you talk about, Irish, ethnic whites, and black people coming together and pushing back and say, no, we need better pay, safer conditions, all of that. And then what happened? Besides coming with the cops and others to break that up, they also then say to ethnic whites, well, you're not the same as those black guys, right? So we'll give you the extra $1 as long as you're not continuing to organize with them. And they're like, all right, cool. Okay, that's how you get also, is you talking about the oppression of Irish people here in New York City, and then they are moved into what? Jobs in the fire department, in NYPD, right? Those are favors, those are special treatment, so you are not like those people. And then they end up staying in that position because I'm at least higher up than him, right? So there is evidence of that. So that's what happened. So yes, they are used to getting favors. They are used to special treatment. And so now when you say, let's be fair, let's let's do it, it's just like, hey, wait a minute. I got a card, special treatment, whiteness.
Thank you so much. I know the ancestors held up the reign as long as they could. I appreciate that. So we're gonna wrap up. I do want to read these questions and give folks an opportunity to respond to any of them. I have one as well. But I do want to thank NAACP, Urban League, ASALA, the New York City Parks Department, New York City Department of Records, Arc of Justice, New York City Council, Black Caucus, Synergy Interpretation, thank y'all, New York City Landmark Preservation, Stephen Thompson, and my OPA, the Office of Public Advocate, Comms Constituent Service, and particularly a shout out to Curtis, who really helped take lead this, so I appreciate it. So to wrap up, and there are some tables where people should go, just these questions real quick. One is a comment from Marcia, I think Kirk, Manhattan, slavery in New York City is the topic, records of enslaved. The archives has records of enslaved in New York City. What suggestions do we have? We encourage people to visit archives to learn about slavery from the stories of that time. We do have a table there that has some of the information as well. J.B. Abdul Majid from Manhattan, re-education of New York's children. Do you believe there needs to be a re-education of New York students about the history of New York's role in anti-black oppression? And the last one from Giselle Harlem, which is a whole nother topic in itself. It is a burgeoning hot topic in our community, so it's probably another panel, but I want to make sure I don't ignore it. Why do we accept the term of people of color instead of claiming black foundational people? So those are some of the questions from the audience. I want to end with this, and anyone who, as you give your final statements, the last question was, Douglas ended not in despair, but in hope for change nation. If we gather, again in 300th anniversary, what do you want to be able to say has happened in the 50 years between now and then? And what is each of us responsible for making it true? So I'd like that last one to guide your last comments, but you can respond to any of the questions from the audience as well. We'll start from Chris and Andrew Bengal.
What do we hope in 50 years? I think that we have to really educate ourselves about what's actually going on, because we're being bombarded constantly with propaganda, and all this misinformation is trying to unravel our sense of society and our connections to each other. We should love our neighbors. Our neighbors watch. If our house is on fire while we're at work, don't we want our neighbor to call the fire department? You know what I mean? Like I do, you know? And don't we want, if you see your neighbor's kid wander out into the street, a little toddler, are you going to just ignore the child in the street? No. Any human nature is to help your neighbor and to help your brother. That's human nature. So what these forces going around right now are asking us to act against our human nature. And I think that the only way we can guard against that is to make friends with people and know our neighbors and be closer together, and to not forget that we all are different, but we're stronger together. I think that's the you know, when you because you also talk about your, you know, if your older self, what would your older self tell your younger self right now? You know, part of it would be make more friends, you know, get out more, talk to people, educate the people you connect with, and be present, you know, be present in your child's life, be present in your neighbor's kid's life, you know. And it sounds simple, but I think that kind of behavior builds the future you want to see, you know. And you know, that's something I really believe in, and I think that we all need to remember we're not alone, and all these forces are trying to isolate us. And I think the way forward, something we could be proud of, is that we didn't let ourselves be isolated. That's what comes to mind.
I spoke earlier about what happened after George Floyd was murdered, and how there was this moment of pro-blackness, and we all knew that it wasn't going to last long. But had I known then that it would actually become the anti-blackness that we're living in right now, that DEI would be accused of being the reason for a helicopter falling, it pains me. And so I think about 50 years from now, we've got to take DEI back. And that people need to continue to be proud of being black, but that the 300,000 black women that lost their jobs won't be at risk of losing their jobs as a result of being qualified and amazing black women. I think that there's so much damage that is happening as a result of this administration, and so we will have to dig so deep and so hard in order to bring that back. But I also think that we should take this as an opportunity to expand the work that we're doing, working with young people, whether it's Freedom Schools or in our case, our Project Ready programs. But I think that we need to be able to develop the messages such that that people understand and feel and act on the fact that our voting right is so very important and so vital right now. And so I think that 50 years from now, I want to see voter participation be just like, whoa, that's incredible to see the achievements of Black folks, Black businesses, to be at an all-time level of achievement, just because it's going to take so long to dig deep and come back from the place that the Trump administration has put us in right now.
I'm looking forward to the third founding. I made mention of this before, that there have been many periods we like to think of America because of what we have been taught we have one founding and we don't. Yes, there's the founding of the establishment of the country that is getting ready to celebrate 250 years. Second would be after the end of enslavement and Reconstruction, where there was another founding. And if you have an opportunity, that's my favorite part of our history to study, to think about Black folks and working class white folks coming together, creating new state constitutions, creating democracy in a different way, and then immediately thwarted by wealthy interests and reigning in control. And then we have what we call the modern civil rights movement, where again we're expanding, right, democracy. And one thing that this period has shown us is it exposed more of the cracks of American democracy. And so now it is upon us in the next 50 years, hopefully not 50, hopefully a few more, but in 50 years we will be living, right, in the results of that next founding. Like, how are we going to shore up those cracks? And for any of those who do construction, whether it's breaking up all the concrete and repaving it and making it right, and not just paving over cracks for it to continue to dismantle. What are the things in our laws? What are the things in our society that we need to break up and repave and create additional things and put additional things in place, so that this American democracy that we have been working on over time continues to expand and continues to bring more people in.
Again, a little hard answers to follow. I think it's funny you mentioned a new founding. We have a resistance to change here, and we think the documents that the quote unquote founding fathers that we inherited from them are set in stone, and they were never meant to evolve. I mean, we don't learn from the world. France had 5 republics; they ripped it up and started again. But in the United States, which has such a limited view of history, we think we got it right and it's perfect, and it's all the minorities and quote unquote minorities asking for rights that are messing up things. I think part of it is understanding that we're in a world that the United States is not the world. We are a part of we're a small part of the population. We take a disproportionate amount of the resources and wealth, and yet we rank near the bottom as far as our understanding of the world and our education of the world. But we rank near the top as far as how we feel about ourselves and our understanding of the world, what we think we know. And because we have a disproportionate amount of power in the world, like what you do as an American, whether you vote or don't vote, whether what you believe or don't, a Kenya will die, or someone in Congo will die, or have an opportunity, or in South America, a president will be abducted or not, depending on what you do here. But we're also some of the most ignorant people in the world. It by definition makes us the most dangerous people in the world, right? So in 50 years, just from hegemonic cycle, it's going to fall apart. We're seeing it fall apart now, and what we're seeing is the resistance against that, like this backlash, this fear of the browning of the world and browning of America. There are only 7%. There are only 7% white folks in the world. They only make up 7%. Most of the world is black and brown, but the mentality is that you're the minority, that the power is not yours, the resources aren't yours, and you should be grateful to be here. In which so I think in 50 years, those paradigms will continue to break. They in 50 years, we hopefully will, like, we will understand that we're all people on a rock hurling through space, and we need to figure it out together, right? And these false ideas of like you in Africa, you're not even black. I go back to I live in Brooklyn. I was born in the States, but whenever I go back within the first few hours, I'm like, there's no such thing as black. That was a construct white people made up when they got there, and then taught us to embrace it. You know, so when we start to let go of these constructs and realize we are people on a rock hurling through space, we have all the resources we need. We've been taught that we need to work to get money for food where that grows naturally anyway, and water that's free. When we start to really question the things we know, I think that's where we will start to get together as people in the world. We have to be stronger and not just think that we're Americans, but we're actually people in the world. You know, global citizens. Right?
Can we give another round of applause for our panel, please? I really appreciate them and everyone who participated. I do want to shout out Herman Hall, who's a historian of Caribbean diaspora in this country, and everyone who came out in a little rain. I really appreciate that, and the team who made this happen. In 50 years, I hope that moral arc has bent just a little bit more, and that my daughter's world is a little better than the one we have right now. And I hope people figure out all we got to do is whatever we can, wherever you are, with what you have, no matter what color you are. And hopefully facts, you realize that is an indictment. The facts of the past are an indictment of the past. They're not an indictment of anyone now, unless we don't do anything about it. So I appreciate y'all coming out. I guess happy 250th, y'all gonna celebrate. But make sure we celebrate with the proper critique, with the proper remembrance, and let's make sure we don't make the same mistakes that people made who came before. So thank y'all, appreciate you. Peace and blessing, love and light to you all. And the great uniter was Nixon 5.
Love you, public advocate.
And true to our ancestral form, we're going to close out with drumming. So thank you. And I also want to give a shout out to our amazing OPA interns who without this would not have been possible. Chelsea, care supporting parents, we also supported us for this event. So Zaire.
Thank you, intern.
Nice pictures, right?